Why are countries in NATO, namely Germany, having a large percentage of their energy needs paid, to Russia and taken care of by Russia? Now, if you look at it, Germany is a captive of Russia because they got rid of their coal plants, they got rid of their nuclear. They're getting so much of the oil and gas from Russia. I think it's something that NATO has to look at. I think it's very inappropriate. You and I agree that it's inappropriate.
Those comments coming just hours ago from President Trump, creating a firestorm at the NATO Summit. You're taking a live look right now at the opening ceremonies for this historical event. Now, this morning, we're joined by Wright State political expert Lee Hanna. He's here to talk about the high-stakes meeting and what this means. Now, I want to start off with those comments. How unusual is it for a sitting American president to come out and attack his allies like this?
Sure. So we've seen this in the past, maybe from other, parts of the administration. I think back to, prior to the Iraq War, Donald Rumsfeld had some pretty strong words for some European allies. But yes, this is very rare. And, with President Trump, though, it reminds me of the G7 summit just last month, where also there were some pretty harsh words for the allies about trade policy and defense policy and everything else.
The president has openly complained that NATO countries are not paying their share. Now, is there any truth to that?
So he, along with previous presidents, have pushed NATO countries to increase their spending. And so the goal is to get to 2% of their respective GDPs by 2024. Many countries are on pace. He actually has been successful in bringing in some more money. I believe their budget increased by about $14 billion from allies just in the past year. So, he's had some success there. He has used some facts and figures that are pretty hard to find or pretty hard to corroborate as he talks about how much more the United States is paying. And it is worth noting this is a collective security agreement. It was formed during the Cold War. The United States benefits from this agreement as much as other countries, as it really is as strong as the credible commitments are. And so there are allies like within the NATO organization that are worried that with the United States kind of pushing the stronger rhetoric, will they really be there if a NATO country were attacked or invaded? Something similar to the Crimea situation a couple years ago with Russia.
Now, obviously, with some of the NATO allies starting to pay more of their GDP, the president's got a victory there in some respects, but yes, are there some downsides to possibly ostracizing some of these countries?
Yeah, that's where it's really, really challenging. So on the one hand, he's criticizing some trade policy, and NATO isn't really about trade. So they're kind of talking past one another in that way. The other issue is these countries are generally opinion of the United States, opinion of President Trump is abysmally low in these countries, especially right now. So they don't necessarily have pressure from their own country to really work with the president as much as maybe you do kind of worry long term about just the trust that is there. And again, NATO has this Article 5, if any of us are attacked, we all will respond, which has been a huge deterrence to aggression from other countries. If that becomes something that countries like, in the Baltic states don't believe is really credible, then, you start to see some fallout. And so that is kind of the concern moving forward is, how strong are these alliances still? Meanwhile, the president's rhetoric about Russia has really changed compared to previous administrations.
Many people sitting at home may remember his campaign. He was a very strong nationalist, talked about protecting American interests first. So does this come as any surprise to maybe his political base?
It's interesting. I would say when we look at the presidency so far, there are areas where he's very typical, like with the courts, his appointments, very typical, very, very what we would expect from a Republican president. But his policy on trade really goes completely against Republican orthodoxy, even more than Democratic orthodoxy. And then, the way he's kind of acted internationally has been, again, kind of breaking from previous norms of both Republican and Democratic presidents.
He's going from these tense moments with some of our allies here this week to a meeting with President Putin from Russia. Do you expect the tone to be different at all with that meeting?
That's one that we'll all be watching closely. It seems like the way he's at least talked about him, coming in, that it is going to be a warmer tone, that he sees a potential, warmer relationship with Russia as a benefit to the United States and the world. It was interesting, he struck out against, in that clip you saw, he struck out against the German chancellor and their agreement with Russian oil companies. So I don't know what exactly he was doing with that criticism, if he's about to go and perhaps kindle a warmer relationship.
Well, thank you so much, Lee, for joining us this morning,
thank
providing
you.
some very valuable insight.